Hi, Caleb. I want to introduce you that you're with Prosperity Mortgage. I'm in the Ebby Halliday Rockwall office, and Caleb is one of our team members that we have inside our office, but he is also all across the DFW area and he does assist in several offices. So he's just a great contact, a great person because he helps out, at the Lake offices all the way over to Arlington, Collin County. So he has a real pulse and touch on the market. He comes into our office on Tuesdays and he gives us an update on what's going on in the mortgage world, gives us training and everything. And since we have the hot topic of what happened with the Fed rate, um, I wanted to kind of interview Caleb a little bit about some of the touch points that you went through, because I think sometimes consumers and even some realtors may not be aware of when we have a Fed rate, what that means and what it is. The first thing, these are the things that caught my attention and caught my eye because, I'm always reading all this kind of stuff all the time because mortgage rates affect so much of what we do. My market, is it hot? Is it cool? Those kind of things. So, one of the things that you had said, and make sure I'm correct on this on my notes, is that the rates last week, this was before the Fed dropped, the Fed rate dropped for that announcement that the rates last week were the lowest they have been since October of 22. Is that right? Did I remember that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. So leading up to the Fed meeting last Tuesday, when they met, we actually, as lenders in the industry, and this happens almost like a trend, right? Leading up to big announcements, big Fed meetings, usually lenders are lowering their interest rates with anticipation of these Fed meetings, with the anticipation
Yeah.
of a Fed rate cut. And we actually did hit a mark within the last 2 to 3 weeks prior to the Fed meeting of lows since the October of 2022. So rates have actually been the best that we've had probably in the 3 year period, which is fantastic. And what we try to do is be able to communicate that with our clients with the expectations, be able to sit and talk about here's what the trends are, here's what's going on in the market. Any clients that we pre-approved previously that may have not qualified, or even that do qualify, just giving them an update to touch points. Say you refer a client to me, they pre-approved for this, but now because of the rates being lower, they may qualify for slightly more. So try to keep them updated on that.
Yeah, I was super impressed with was because we talked last time about that window of opportunity, that we're in that window of opportunity. Super impressed about that. We went through the meeting as far as the clients that you had that were already pre-approved. Maybe they were in contract negotiations. They're looking at, should I lock in, my interest rate? They were at some point where they were thinking about, I need to lock that in. And you were going through and calling, which was a large database, going through and calling them all and saying, hey, rates are going to be lower this week than when the Fed, makes their announcements. This is what we think that's going to happen. And I was super impressed with that you took the time to take care of your clients, go through and because how much did rates go up the next day after the Fed announcement? Do you remember?
Yeah, so it's not always that case, right? So
Okay.
the Fed will meet, they'll talk about everything that's going on in the economy. What you see is a Fed rate cut. So we did see the Fed cut the Fed rate by 0.25%. There was rumors it could have been anywhere from a quarter to a half a percent. It ended up being a quarter of a percent. Um, but what the biggest misconception is that that is the Fed rate. That's the rate at which the banks borrow money. That is not necessarily tied to mortgage interest rates. So the Fed rate, when you see them cut that rate, you're going to see it almost immediately impact car loans, credit card interest rates, student loans, things of that sort. But really tying closely to the mortgage interest rate is a 10-year treasury bond. So with most lenders leading up to the Fed meeting, we had lowered the interest rates, what they quote unquote bake them in leading up to the Fed meeting. But whenever they actually sat down and talked, I mean, the reason for the cut of the Fed was the Fed officials cited softening labor markets and concerns about the economic impact of tariff uncertainty as key factors driving the expectation for rate cuts. So whenever you're talking about those types of things, we saw that happen. And then shortly after they announced the Fed rate cut, we had an announcement, conversations that were being had by the parties at that symposium, and I guess some things were not liked as well or understood or caused some confusion. And when that happened, and this happens quite frequently, and it's what you call a trend, is Fed rate decreased, but mortgage interest rates actually increased because of uncertainty.
Yeah.
So, and that happens quite frequently, which is why most of the time leading up 2, 3 weeks prior to the Fed meeting, we always try to communicate with our buyers, hey, look, this is where it's at. This is where it's looking like. We don't know what's going to truly happen with interest rates, but you're right. In the media, it says, hey, rates have lowered. All it says
Yeah.
is lowered, but it doesn't actually say mortgage interest rates have lowered. And that's the biggest misconception.
Yeah, because that's right now we have, as far as realtors, we talked about at our office meeting, we're getting questions that people are saying, I'm going to wait because I saw in the news that the Fed rate could drop by 1% this year. And they're thinking that that means, a correlation, like if you have a one drop on the Fed rate, that mortgage rates are, let's say mortgage rates are at 7 and they're now going to be 6. And that's just one of the things as a realtor, I feel like I'm always kind of combating is because the Fed rate is now I'm correct here. This is the rate banks borrow money at.
You're
And that
100%.
and mortgage rates is factored that the rate that they borrow it at, and then there's other factors like we're talking about the stock market. There's many different factors that affect a mortgage rate because it is a longer term mortgage, where a credit card loan may be more impacted and maybe more impacted by a Fed lowering the rate, or a car loan may be more impacted. But an actual mortgage rate, it's just a different kind of calculation, a different kind of product. And so even if the Fed does reduce the rate that they borrow money at by 1%, only did a quarter point, but let's say for this year, that does not necessarily mean that we're going to see rates drop by 1%. Would that be a correct way to kind of word it?
I mean, that'd be pretty accurate as far as the way to assume. I mean, obviously, if we had a crystal ball, if we could be able to tell you exactly what we believe that rates are going to do, I mean, there's forecast, there's projected rates. I mean, after the Fed cut the quarter percent last Tuesday, there is the anticipation. They have what's called the Fed dot plot, which is a graph that shows projected additional Fed rate cuts.
Right.
There is a projection for an additional two more Fed rate cuts this year of a quarter percent. Again, one next year and one in 2027. So there is the projection that the Fed rate is going to come down, but we need to closely monitor what's going on in the labor market, closely monitor what's going on with the uncertainty in the tariff market. Follow the 10-year Treasury bond. As a 10-year Treasury bond improves or either improves or goes up or down, you just want to be able to monitor that more closely to show kind of a trend of what rates could do. Do I anticipate that we may see a slight decrease to the interest rate? Most likely. But getting a full 1% reduction within the next year, I mean, no one knows. And I don't truly believe that it's gonna, I mean, be a full 1%. But I mean, if I knew, we would all be very, very, I could play the stock market very well. So
Yeah, yeah. So I think one of the things, the biggest problem that we have as realtors is that the media or the news, when they announce this rate cut, they aren't really saying. I think when they hear rate cut, we think mortgage because we're in real estate. If you're buying a home, if you're selling a home, if you're doing those different things, that's the rates that we're looking at. And that's not the correlation. Really, when they're making that announcement, it's just the rate that banks borrow money at, and it can probably affect you can get a lower car loan. Your credit cards would be lower, as far as those rates that different have. Now, a lot of the mortgage, the different coaches, the different real estate, the different things I have, Brian Buffini right now at Leadership Conference, he came out last week and he said, we'll know that the market's going to be hot when rates get down to 5.9%. But another source that I follow is saying, don't expect rates to be under six until, 2026, May, June of 2026. So we just want to I just kind of want everybody to realize we are at a pretty good rate right now. October of 22 is where, just a week ago, we were at the lowest rate since then. And Caleb, where can they go if they were wanting? Do you have like a website that kind of posts like what the 30-year rates are? If people would just want to talk to you just to kind of find out what is the best fit for them in their mortgage.
No, absolutely. So, I mean, you can visit my website at my first name, Caleb, Caleb, Wheeler, Wheeler, dot P as in Papa, H as in Hotel, M as in Mike, loans with an S.com. So calebwheeler dot phnloans.com. I mean, and to kind of couple on what you were saying there, Liz, is, I mean, think about it this way. 3 weeks ago, rates were at 6.875.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, say on a median right now, they're anywhere from 6.1 to 6.375. Okay. The buying power alone there from 6.8 to 6.1 to 6.3. I mean, you just added, I mean, quite a bit of an additional buying power to a client that wants to be able to get into that home. So say they did qualify at 500,000, but the lowering of interest rates now allows them to be able to get into that home or even at to 525. That makes a huge difference when you're talking about just that amount.
Mhm.
I mean, we've got such a big pool of buyers out there. We know we had that problem 4 years ago with not enough inventory. Now we've got a ton of inventory. And we've talked about leading up to the Fed rate in September, a lot of buyers saying, hey, we're just going to wait. We're going to wait. We're going to wait because we want to see what the market does. Well, we've seen it. We've seen this rate reduction. Now is the time because, like you said, we have all this inventory. We have all these buyers that are sitting on the side. I truly believe that if rates do come down any further, we may see not necessarily a repeat of 2020, 21, 22, where people were paying a large.
Yeah, that was a one-time COVID thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do believe that we're going to see a bidding war on some homes just because you've got such a large amount of buyers that were waiting. So now is the time. The recommendation by everybody that we read about is to lock in an interest rate if you're able to get qualified.
Yeah, I've been really encouraging everybody for the fourth quarter that if if you know that buying a home is something between Q4 and the first of 2026, that right now you should really start looking because you may find a seller that's negotiable, willing to make a contribution towards lowering your interest rate. So the seller contribution that we've talked about before. They may be negotiable on doing some repairs or even a little bit negotiable on the price itself. And if we get in, because we're in a neutral market, is where we're statistically, where we're at is a neutral market with our National Association of Realtors stats. And if we get into a seller's market, they're going to negotiate differently. And so right now, I feel like people are getting really good buys. They have tons of inventory to look at. We've got beautiful homes. So it just makes a huge difference, the experience that they go through and the deals they have. But I feel like we've got this window in 2025 that I'm not sure is going to exist in 2026. And I also really appreciate that, of those buyers that you have that are kind of on the fence, you're going back in, you're calling them, you're kind of letting them know so that maybe they get the call from you and the home that they've been seeing online, they may not tell me, but the home that they're seeing online may be 525. And then you're giving them that call and saying, hey, just so you know where your affordability factor is at now because of this interest rate, you would be able to, you can look at homes up to 530, 540 or something like that. And it may be that the neighborhood they want, the features they want is just a little bit more expensive, but they could have the same payment with that low rate where they're at. So I really appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope to talk to you again in 2 weeks when we have some more news. I want to talk next time where we talk a little bit about the market. How did this Fed rate cut affect applications? We're going to talk about that. We'll talk about where the rates are going, where we're seeing the end of the year as far as mortgages, and what's on the horizon for home loans in 2026.
Sounds fantastic. Thank you again, Liz. Really appreciate it.
All right, take care. Bye bye.
Bye.